Well, ladies and gentlemen, I absolutely hate to do this to you. We are in the middle of the season, but we are going to have to take a step a bit outside of just the games that are going on tonight. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get any conversation about what's coming up in week 6 of the college football season. I certainly have thoughts as far as that goes, but we have another dangerous story here about what the Big Ten and the SEC are trying to pull off and how they continue to make moves that are eventually going to just cannibalize and ruin this sport that we all love so much. They are so brazen in what it is that they want to do in short-term cash grabs for themselves to rig the system in favor of themselves when they don't need to. This is greed. It is greed that is going to be the downfall of this sport. And it does feel like when I see stories like this, that it's just about holding on for dear life until the sport inevitably does crumble. So I hate to be so negative again in the middle of the season, right? But we're going to get into this story that is broken this week about what's happening between the Big Ten and the SEC. And I just hate it. And you combine that with the story about the Super League, the College Sports Tomorrow Super League that has come out now. We talked about it months ago, but they now have an official release that's out there. Basically, they've just gone more public than, Andrew Marchand getting an inside peek at some of the details there. That's now out, and you see a lot of the takes from Big Ten and SEC country about how stupid it is and why would anybody do this and all that. And you just have to shake your head. You just have to shake your head at the short-sightedness of all of it. We even have Mike Gundy out here talking about college football needing a commissioner, which it does. Greg Sankey had some thoughts on that. And guess what? You'll be shocked, I'm sure, to find out that they absolutely sucked, that they were terrible. And it was very on brand from Greg Sankey, the self-anointed czar of college football these days. So, anyway, we even have a lot of realignment to get caught up on, which also not my favorite thing to do during the season, but it does have a lot of reverberations, even for instance, Big 12 fans, Gonzaga, which the Big 12 had flirted with, and it seemed like Brett Yormark did have somewhat of a liking for. Gonzaga is going to the Pac-12, and it's actually a pretty big win for the Pac-12, I would say, after they've had a rough couple of weeks here, at least, and especially in terms of fighting the narrative. So if you are somebody who supports Washington State and Oregon State and what they're trying to do right now, it was good for them. It was good for them. So a feather in the cap there. And I think there are a lot of doors that this could open, especially if you believe John Wilner, who I'm going to read to you some from. This show, for those of you that are new or relatively new, obviously it originates from Big 12 country. We talk about all things that affect college football and college athletics, but being based in Big 12 country, you are going to get a perspective that comes from there. And I have a couple of nice things, hopefully we can end the show on, that are more big picture about the Big 12. Some pretty good TV ratings. We continue to see that. Coach Prime and Colorado are a huge part of that, but it's beyond just that. There are 2 other Big 12 schools that had really nice showings last week. And the Big 12 computer numbers look really good. As we sit here and have a conversation throughout this show about the Big 10 and the SEC and what they're doing and trying to basically shut everybody else out, we've got some news that the Big 12 is actually closer probably to the Big 10 than the Big 10 would like to think in terms of strength on the field right now, according to computers who do not lie and are not subject to brand bias necessarily anyway. So that's what I have for you. Plus, look, we'll run through the week 6 Big 12 games coming up. I will get you my thoughts on all of that. Your thoughts are more than welcome, as always, on the show, and you can chime in by clicking the $ below the chat box. That is how you can create a super chat that will in turn show up in a separate column for me. So it guarantees that you cut through all the other noise in the chat and you will make it on the show. That's the way to do it. Click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. You can also chime in via Venmo, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. And if you contribute that way, I will kick off the next show with your question or comment. So make sure to leave a question or comment there if you are someone who's not watching the show live. Very, very easy to still support and be a part of the conversation. I could not do it without all of you guys who support in that way, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Also, a totally free way to support is not only to just like the video, subscribe if you are not subscribed. I do go look at those numbers, and about 50% of the views are people who are not subscribed. So please double check that. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Free way to help. But the other thing, if you're a Big 12 fan or you're just a college football fan that wants to read news from a Big 12 perspective, I'm telling you, I'm cutting out all this Big 10 and SEC bias, right, that we're about to talk about here tonight. And I'm getting you straight Big 12 news filtered right to your inbox multiple times a week for free. You just go to ofbnews.com to subscribe. It's the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com to subscribe. We are to almost 2,500 Big 12 fans who are already reading Open for Business. And I just sent one out today with some fresh new Big 12 power rankings. Quite a debate at the top there. Quite a debate at number one. And if you want to know who I picked, sign up at ofbnews.com for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. I do have to give a shout out to my friend Polly. Appreciate you, Polly, on Venmo. She contributes to the channel, and very, very generously so. I appreciate that a bunch. She says, amazing communication, John. I love your personality. I could listen to you for hours, and I do. How about that? Thank you, Paulie, for the wonderful compliment and for just being such a great supporter of the channel. All right, let me kick things off with a couple of super chats here, and we're going to dive into this Big Ten SEC story, especially because Ryan is right on top of it. Ryan, thank you, sir. Ryan says, Greg snaky. Pretty good. He is. And this is one of those instances of kind of like, don't hate the player, hate the game, I suppose, because Sankey's job as SEC commissioner is to strengthen the league. He certainly does that. Look, I'm not here to say that Greg Sankey is like bad at his job. That's not it at all, because if the job is to be a power broker for the SEC, he is excellent at doing that, at least in a short-sighted fashion. But the problem here is that college football just desperately needs some leadership to step in and be like, look, we got to look out for the long term of the sport here. And it's not just about, oh, here's all these whiners that feel like they're getting left out. It's our own self-interest for this thing to exist in a profitable way 10, 20, 30 years from now would be to not cut out giant swaths of the country that have previously been included in all of this. And Sankey holds more power than anybody, and somebody who could stand up and at least start to be a voice that would rally people that way. Now, if that all sounds way too naive and way too like la-di-da children's book story kind of thing, I understand. It is. Doesn't change the reality of where the sport is headed and what it's going to mean eventually for all these people. Now, that may not even affect Greg Sankey. The guy could be long gone by then. It's kind of like the same conversation we have about the university presidents, right, who all get involved in realignment and these types of decisions. Like, they're leaving now within 5 years, so it may not affect them. They don't have to worry. They can write the check and not have to worry about actually being able to cash that. So anyway, Ryan, will my Cougars beat Arizona, UCF, Utah, and Arizona State? Will they beat all four of them? Ryan, it is, I mean, no offense to this, but no, I do not think they will win all of those games. Is there a specific one in there? I mean, the road trip to Utah will be difficult, although who the hell knows what is going on with Cam Rising? I read a really good story from Josh Furlong, who does an awesome job covering Utah for KSL.com. But I read his work this week, and I heard him ask a question straight up to Kyle Whittingham about fan criticism that's coming out there, people feeling like he is able to play but doesn't want to or isn't for some reason, not playing through the pain. And Whittingham was like, look, man, nobody wants to be out there more than him. But it continues to just be shrouded in total mystery, much like it was last year. We really have no freaking idea what is going to happen with Cam Rising. They've got a bye week, but so I'd like to say, I guess, long story short, I'd imagine he'd be playing by that point in time, but it's been 670 days since he played a full football game. Okay. Since he played a full football game, it's been 670 days. So it is hard to say that. It's going to be a tough game either way, I would say. Arizona, I think, is going to be a tough game now. Look, they made the move away from Dino Babers as offensive coordinator, new play caller. That seemed to work pretty damn well at Utah. I think they're still very, very dangerous. I'm not completely writing UCF off, although that was a wildly disappointing result on Saturday against Colorado and Arizona State. I mean, that's still a pretty salty team too. That's got some kick to it. So I don't think any of those games are gimmies. I would probably anticipate out of that, 2-2 or 3-1 for BYU. So I do not expect them to run the table, but I do expect them to continue to be in that conversation up near the top of the Big 12 standing. So I hope that suffices. Love talking actual football. Unfortunately, you can't go, feels like, a week in this sport without turning around and seeing some story that's going to infuriate you just about the current state of the sport and what's going on. And now, guys, guess what? We've got the whole 4 automatic bid conversation coming up again. This is another convo that we've had before, and it's just resurfaced. It came to the forefront that the Big Ten and SEC wanted 4 automatic berths into the new playoff if and when, emphasis really on the when, it expands to 14 teams. They want 4 auto bids each. That was thrown out there. It was like floated, and then it got waves of pushback. Everybody hated that. Like, why do you need this, Big Ten and SEC? You have so many more resources, so much more money. You have the prestige advantage. Like, you're going to get teams in. Why do you need to do this and make it look so rigged from the outside? And then it quieted down. And then we didn't really hear anything. We thought, like, okay, maybe they realized that there's going to be too much public outcry about that. But no, they've just, speaking of Greg Snakey, he's just been slithering around in the bushes, hiding in the bushes. You know, there's a snake that hangs around in the bushes of my girlfriend's backyard. We don't always see it, but then, you know, you'll hear the dog barking out there, and there's the snake. That's Greg Sankey just waiting around here trying to pick up those 4 automatic bids for the SEC into the college football playoff. They're having a meeting. They formed this alliance of sorts, mastermind group. I forget what I'm messing up the correct terminology, and I promise I'm not doing it on purpose. But they're working together, and we have another story about that this week. I'm reading to you from Heather Dinich of ESPN. Big Ten and SEC athletic directors will discuss a possible partnership in football scheduling, along with their preferences for automatic bids in the next iteration of the college football playoff. It will take place at an in-person meeting in Nashville next week. Multiple sources from both conferences told ESPN on Monday. The future scheduling partnership, which, you know, I forgot about this, even in the buildup to all this. A scheduling partnership is also like a pretty nasty move here by the Big Ten and the SEC, because they're really cutting everybody out potentially here. Now, Dinich says a scheduling partnership between the Big Ten and the SEC could hinge on whether the SEC eventually decides to go to 9 conference games, because the Big Ten is not going to want to do something that they view as unfair. Like, hey, you guys get on the same level as us, play 9 conference games, then we can do a scheduling agreement with each other. But you see where this is building towards, right? Like, you're going to have, like, the SEC, I imagine, is not going to give up its, week 10, week 11, when they bring in the Chattanoogas of the world to play those games against FCS opponents or lower level G5 opponents. They're going to have a game like that on the schedule. They're going to have 9 conference games. Then if you have one with the Big Ten, like, start doing the math, you've got maybe 1 regular season game left. They're cutting out games against Big 12 or ACC opponents. Then what do they want as a part of the criteria for being selected into the college football playoff? Well, first of all, they want 4 automatic bids. And second of all, they're going to want strength of schedule to weigh heavily into all of this. Well, if you remove opportunities for the Big 12 and the ACC to play Big 10 or SEC opponents, it certainly becomes much more difficult to get your strength of schedule to a point where they would deem it appropriate to include you in the playoff. It is rigging the system. It is rigging the system with this gluttonous greed that the SEC and the Big 10 have, where like, when is enough enough? Everything is tilted in your favor immensely right now with the financial advantages that you have because of the TV deals that you are signing. Just stop. Just stop. Take away the illusion of this being so much of like just feeling like collusion, just working together to create a monopoly and force everybody else out. I mean, either that or just go leave and do your own thing. For those of you that read the newsletter, again, ofbnews.com to sign up for my Big 12 newsletter, open for business. For those of you that read the newsletter, you already saw my response to Brandon Walker. I guess if you're on Twitter, you saw it too, at J.O. Kurtz, who, SEC-based podcast host, who said, like, he laid out all the Big 12 teams and said, one of these teams is going to make the playoff. That's pretty stupid. And I was like, look, if you think that's pretty stupid, then just what are we doing here? Go break off and do your own thing. Go break off and do your own thing. If this is what you want to do, then go break off and do your own thing and save us all some time. And again, come back to me in 10 years when you've got less interest in your product and the money spigot has run out. And it's not just spitting out water, spitting out money like it's water, because there will be less interest. There will be diminishing returns in that over time. But just go do it. Just go do it if that's what you're trying to do here. More from Dinich. Sources in both leagues told ESPN on Monday they would prefer to potentially have 4 automatic bids each to the playoff when the contract begins in 2026, the next contract. College football playoff leaders haven't determined yet what the playoff will look like beyond this season and next. Some said they need to know that before making any decisions about future scheduling partnerships. All right, so yeah, the SEC may be like, look, scheduling partnership, if we're going to go to 9 games, we need to know what the criteria is going to be for the playoff, how this will all work. Do we get the automatic bids? Another thing that's being talked about a lot with this is eliminating the selection committee, which is funny to me because, I mean, in Big 12 country, for instance, you don't need to remind anybody about what happened in 2014 with TCU and Baylor, and TCU going from 3 to 6 on a week when they won by like 40. And Ohio State getting into the college football playoff. The selection committee seems to work out quite fine for the Big 10 and SEC brands. And I can't really imagine why they would foresee that being any sort of issue based on history and human nature. We know where everybody in that room would gravitate towards because of history. We've seen how it goes. And human nature, we know generally how humans are going to react. Ask Florida State fans about this, and they fancy themselves a pretty big brand and are. But they got beat out by a bigger brand from the SEC last year with entry to the college football playoff. I feel like the committee has worked out pretty well, but I guess just to eliminate any and all doubt that the SEC and Big 10 are going to get as many teams in as they possibly need, Heather Dinich says some have also expressed interest in limiting the role of the 13-member selection committee or eliminating it entirely. Quote, I think anything we can do to take the subjectivity of a committee off the table is really helpful, the SEC source said. We may not be able to completely get rid of subjectivity, the more we can minimize it. And so Tony Petitti's idea of multiple automatic spots for a conference has a lot of value. They do, this SEC source closes with, I'm not sure 4 is the right number. Well, there are plenty of people who are pretty sure that 4 is definitely not the right number, but we shall see. It just, hearing them talk like that about the selection committee is pretty amazing to me. Just amazing. And again, it comes back to this idea of like, when is enough, man? Like, a candy bar is great. A Snickers bar is great. If you're hungry, you're craving it, it's awesome. 50 Snickers bars. At a certain point, there will be diminishing returns on that. It's going to make you sick. It's not going to be good. It's just too much gluttony and greed that is going on here with these two leagues. And it's not going away, because this was the type of issue that was brought up. It got a ton of pushback. They saw that but they saw that there were plenty of people who were going to give a hell of a lot of pushback on the idea of 4 automatic bids. So you wait for it to die down. You wait for the season to start when everybody is more distracted by what's actually happening on the field and like, hey, look over here. Here's Georgia, Alabama. Remember how epic that game was? Let's all talk about that. Let's watch that game again. Think about the highlights. Talk about how great that was. Oh, by the way, we will be meeting over here in Nashville, and we're going to slip through. We're going to come back with this idea of 4 automatic bids for each of our leagues, even though we want to eliminate subjectivity. Subjectivity is exactly what has helped get us here over the last couple of decades. I digress. I mean, it just kind of is what it is. And I know that I've been somebody that's always said, do I wish and prefer that college football were like it was back in 1998, back in the early 2000s? Of course I do. Absolutely I do. But I realize what the reality is, and I just am going to make the most of what the reality is. Let's push forward. I mean, eventually that's where I will get, but like I've been a little bit fired up by this, by seeing it again. And I get fired up by stuff like this. And, I probably shouldn't. This is a nobody on Twitter that I saw here, but it's just like this is the attitude of a lot of people here, especially those that are in the Big Ten and the SEC. So this was in response to a story about the Super League. So the Super League has been making some news here because they dropped this group, College Sports Tomorrow, dropped their league, which would be the College Student Football League. They actually put something out publicly. It was not just the report that came out months ago. And with the proposal, you got an Ohio State fan here saying a desperate act by schools being left behind. And it's just like, okay, I mean, you can frame it like that if you want to, if you are one of these big boys. And I guess I understand how it happens and how you would do that, but it's just so unwise. It is so short-sighted. I would counter by saying, no, it is in fact a desperate act by people who can see where this is all leading and can understand that like virtually nobody likes where this is at or where this is going. And they understand the law of diminishing returns, and they understand what is happening with the money for live TV right now anyway, and that is not going to just continuously go up if you start cutting out big portions of the country that become disinterested in the sport. It is so short-sighted to not be open to it. In a perfect world, like if you were starting from scratch on how to build college football, that College Sports Tomorrow proposal is pretty damn good. And I know people, it should be more like 40 or 50 teams as opposed to the 72. Guys, the 72 would be great. If you go look at all the leagues, I think did I have that pulled up? I did. I don't know that I do anymore. We have seen them before because when the first report came out, we saw the different leagues. There would be like these 8-team pods. You would have some promotion. Teams that are in that upper group of 72 would not be relegated, but there would be the opportunity for teams from the bottom to come up and like play in the playoff and earn a little bit more money. 94% of the money would go to the top 72, 6% to the rest. And it wouldn't be distributed evenly, by the way. You could still get more money for performing better and being a bigger TV draw. So you still have some of the advantages, SEC and Big Ten. And that would clearly be the best thing to keep everybody involved, keep regional rivalries happening, right? Which is what the sport is just built on, and it drives the sport forward. And we're losing so many of those now. It would bring a lot of those back. It would be great for the fabric and health of the sport, but nobody will want to do it because it will require people relinquishing power. And look, it just is what it is. It is what it is. Along those lines, Mike Gundy made the point, and one thing you would have to have with all of this is a commissioner of everything. Mike Gundy made the point that college football does need a commissioner. Gundy said there's just a few things. It's a simple process. College football needs a commissioner, and it's one of the four guys now. If it's the guy at the SEC, I don't care. We need a commissioner. So Gundy is saying, even if it's Greg Sankey, I don't care. We need a commissioner. And then we need the Power 4, Power 5, if we go back to it. Those commissioners are under this guy. And then we need a football oversight rules committee that is going to enforce whatever rules that we say there are. Recruiting, NIL, salary cap, employment agreements, transfers. He says they all need to follow the NFL model, which again, if the goal is to make the entity as profitable and viable as possible long-term, that's absolutely the way to do it. It's why college football should definitely be trying to pursue something like what College Sports Tomorrow has put together for the benefit of everybody long-term, even the big boys. It would be better for them long-term. But it's not what anybody wants to do. Again, we're talking about relinquishing power. Why would you want to do things the way the NFL has? What does the NFL know about building a big, successful entity? No, instead, it's individual schools that are chasing as much money as possible for them in the short term, the short-term cash grab. That's what you have in the sport. And by the way, as you might expect, we get a Greg Sankey comment on this, and it's very much Greg Sankey. He says on the idea of a college football commissioner, quote, I've studied it a little bit, and I come back to I don't want to dumb down the Southeastern Conference to be a part of some Super League notion with 70 teams that some people speculate would happen. They want to be us, and that's on them to figure it out, not on me to bring myself back to earth. Spoken like a man that will not have to worry about the long-term consequences of all the decisions that are being made right now, because he'll be gone, his pockets will be lined, and it just doesn't matter. Same with a lot of these TV executives at Fox and ESPN that are involved in all of this. It doesn't matter to them. It's no skin off their ass. If college football 15 years from now is totally ruined in a shell of itself and none of us have the thing that has brought us joy in our lives, in a lot of ways, the thing that we all live for, it doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter to Greg Sankey. He's trying to do his job in the short term to make the SEC as rich as possible right now while he's there in charge, and consequences be damned. It's the world we live in. It is the world we live in. I hate it. I imagine many of you probably hate it. By the way, this is where I had it. I did find the leagues here. I will give you one quick check-in here as a reminder to what the leagues were, the pods, whatever you want to say. So we'd have, there you go. I mean, regional rivalries coming back. This makes a ton of sense. Look at that Texas conference. Baylor, SMU, TCU, Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech. Man, that would be so damn fun. That would be so damn fun. You more or less have the old Big Eight back together: Colorado, Kansas, K-State, Missouri, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State. It would allow for rivalry games to be played on a yearly basis within different divisions. Like it's pretty perfect, man. I love this. I know certain schools are going to come back, and I'm sure I'll get the comments. Certain schools, well, we would hate it because of this, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, look at this, like the Southwest and the West. It's literally, we did this once before. It was great. It was the Pac-12. We did that. It made a lot of sense. It was great. There were a lot of regional rivalries there. And then, we blew it up for reasons, because that's how college football rolls these days. Anyway, that's what's been on my mind the most this week. I definitely do want to talk some actual ball here. We have some realignment to squeeze in as well. And we have some contributions from the Super Chats. So let me get to those real quick. Papa Bravo, appreciate you, Papa Bravo. Thank you for being here. Papa Bravo says rumors that the Pac-12 looking to Grand Canyon as a possible member. At what point does the need to expand just become embarrassing? Well, even I would frame it a little bit different than that. I would say, like, who are the two schools? Was it like Toledo and Northern Illinois? There were two MAC schools that were being talked about for the Mountain West. And instead of embarrassing, I would just say, I'm sitting here like, dude, like, just what are we what have we done to this sport where I get the case, like, if they're the most visible brands from the MAC, I'm sure they can help the Mountain West in this scenario, and I don't blame them. They're acting the same way everybody has from the top on down. The SEC takes from the Big 12, so the Big 12 takes from the AAC. They blow up the Pac-12. Now those two schools are fighting for their lives, and they're going to take from the Mountain West. It trickles down. It continues to trickle down, and everybody has to act like that. But it's so dumb that we're here and the things that are happening here. One of those would be, and no offense to Grand Canyon, but one of those would be, yes, the Pac-12 having to look potentially, I guess, at Grand Canyon there. I'll get to the Pac-12 update in just a moment beyond Gonzaga. They also are right now just putting a pause on any further expansion to figure some things out. They still need to add one more. But yeah, more so than embarrassing. I guess if you want to frame it as embarrassing, Papa Bravo, I would just say, like, it's embarrassing for all of us that we let it get here. The NCAA plays a massive role in that. I mean, there's, the revenue sharing number is driving a lot of the cash grabbiness right now. So the NCAA plays a huge role in this, and it's just everybody involved has made so many dumb decisions in the name of amateurism, whatever it may have been over the years. Very, I would say, poorly thought out now, at least with their in-game motivations to do all that. And it's gotten us all to a really dumb, weird spot where that type of thing is happening. So fair point. I see the point that you're making. I would just tweak the viewpoint on that just slightly, just ever so slightly. Michael, what's going on, Michael? Michael, I understand this sentiment, and I think a lot of people are with you when talking about the playoff. I'd rather just split off, do our own thing, let the Big Ten SEC take the Big Ten SEC Invitational, and would rather do that than give them 8 of 12 spots. I think it would be 8 of 14 here in all likelihood, would expand to 14, but still 4 automatic bids for both. Like, think about that right now. In the SEC, it's one thing. And this is a part of what you guys know. This is what always gets me about these discussions. The SEC, as much as you might hate them, I mean, if we're talking about Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, who else am I missing at the top? Because there's somebody else besides Ole Miss that I'm missing there. Like, there are 4 very good teams at the top of the SEC that you can say, all right, like, at least I can sort of understand that. Texas is who I'm missing. My apologies, Texas. Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee. I look at those teams and I say, all right, like, that, those seem like pretty legitimate bona fide playoff teams. Maybe we'll see, I guess, how Tennessee fares the rest of the year with a true freshman quarterback, but they seem to be pretty legit. The Big Ten, we're starting to get into now, like USC. Should we be guaranteeing USC a playoff spot? Do we need to be doing that? Michigan? Thank God we decided to guarantee Michigan a spot in the college football playoff this year. We don't need to be doing that. We don't need to be doing that. But you can see how the whole cycle is just building on itself, cut everybody else out with the scheduling, only play ourselves, only then play the Big Ten, or, vice versa, going across the 2 conferences there. You can see how it's all setting up. You definitely can. All right, so realignment wise, I'm not sure if this is like a shock or a bad day or anything for Brett Yormark, who at least at one point seemed to really want Gonzaga in the Big 12. They're not going to be in the Big 12, even though reports indicated they would have liked to have been. Instead, they're going to the Pac-12, which is an interesting move. I think this is a great move for the actual league itself, and there are a ton of ancillary benefits that come with Gonzaga, like extra benefits that come with adding the Zags, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later on here. So definitely stay tuned to find out what all of that is about, because I was even surprised a little bit in reading some of it, thinking like, oh, that's actually a really good point by John Wilner there. For Gonzaga, it is, I mean, look, it's a step up from the West Coast Conference, for sure. You'll have San Diego State is another really good program. They just played for a national championship not that long ago, just 2 years ago. So it stands to reason that their basketball standing is going to get a little bit better. They're bringing all their other sports geographically. Still makes a lot of sense for Gonzaga, but it's not it's not the massive step up, obviously, in visibility and just strength overall that you would get by joining the Big 12, quite obviously, in hoops. But the Pac-12 is adding Gonzaga as a member in all sports the school plays starting in July 26. According to sources, talks intensified over the past 3 days. Gonzaga brings strong media value to the league from a basketball perspective, as it's one of the sport's top brands and most consistent winners. The Bulldogs have reached every men's NCAA tournament that's been played since 1999, a streak of 25 straight years. Clear what the Pac-12 is getting. I mean, not as much of a step up for Gonzaga, but we'll see also what the finances are going to be. I'll be very curious to see if are they getting like a full share here? Because I know John Wilner wrote about Gonzaga like a day before it happened, and he had advocated almost basically for giving them a full share because of everything that they would bring to the conference, which is quite interesting. I'll get to that in just a second. I will throw this in right now. If you want like the latest on it, after adding Gonzaga, it does sound like the pause button has been hit on further expansion, with the Pac-12 needing to add one more to meet the minimum threshold for the NCAA for a conference. But Dennis Dodd writes from CBS, fresh off the addition of Gonzaga, the Pac-12 is pausing its pursuit of new members as it enters a media rights evaluation for the 8 current schools it has committed to the conference. So they're pausing while they figure out what the media rights evaluation is going to be for the schools they have now. And that evaluation will be led by sports and entertainment consulting firm Navigate, who you see pop up a ton with all of this. And it could last until the end of the year. It will be conducted with multiple hypothetical lineups and membership possibilities. So they're trying to outline all the possibilities, where they're at right now, what that would mean for revenue within the league. Sitting at 7 members, they need to add at least one full-time member to meet NCAA guidelines. Gonzaga announced Tuesday its intention to leave. The Pac-12 has fielded interest from several universities, and that is expected to continue, but the conference is not expected to offer membership until the evaluation is completed. Dennis Dodd, one last note from Dodd here. He added the Pac-12 previously estimated a new media deal could land between $12 million and $15 million. I know some felt that was a bit too high, a bit too optimistic. They didn't get Memphis, who was deemed to be the most valuable property left. Now, a lot of disputing takes as to how much they would actually add in that realm. But I would just say, I think 12 to 15 million, not winding up with UNLV, not winding up with Memphis, is probably a little bit high. That would seem to be a bit rich for my blood based on what they have. But Gonzaga probably does add something to that. We've talked about basketball becoming a little more valuable here in Big 12 country and trying to decouple the basketball rights from the football rights. And Gonzaga is definitely a brand there. It's the best brand. It's the best entity of anything that the Pac-12 actually has in its conference right now that they have added Gonzaga and added some new teams and become, close to a conference. You can definitely feel the heartbeat is there. Like, they're close to a conference. But here's what John Wilner pointed out about Gonzaga when he was kind of making this case, like, hey, the Pac-12 should add them because, and not only add them, the Pac-12 should give them a full share or at least close to it, like make it sweet enough, worth their while. They should do it because they're a March Madness regular that's averaged 3.5 NCAA units per year for the past decade. So every game that you play in the tournament, you earn a unit for your conference, which just means money coming back on the back end for the league. So a unit is about $360,000 per game. which is more than 1.3 million per year. And because the units carry forward for 6 years, the Zags generate about $8 million annually in units. So there you have it right there, the value that Gonzaga brings to the Pac-12. Wilner points out they also generate impressive TV ratings. Against Power 5 opponents over a 5-season span, they average 900,000 viewers. By comparison, the Pac-12 average was closer to 200,000. All right, so Gonzaga is drawing 900K on an average night, 200K on the opposite end for Pac-12 schools. The Zags with Pac visiting arenas and boost ratings. I mean, look, they certainly would do that. Teams would be excited. Fan bases would be excited about Gonzaga coming to town. Big 12 schools would go nuts having Gonzaga come to town. That'd be awesome. So they provide a lot of value for that. They would make the conference, according to Wilner, more attractive for football playing schools that value basketball. I think that doesn't hurt. Would that be enough to push somebody over the top? I don't know, but it definitely doesn't hurt. And Wilner says their stature might allow the Pac-12 to explore scheduling partnerships with the Big 12 and ACC. And he even points out their presence might lead to an arrangement with UConn to become a football playing member that schedules basketball games each year in Pac-12 arenas. However, with that UConn, there was a story in the Hartford paper that said, though the possibility of UConn joining the Pac-12 as a football-only complement was explored last week, it will not happen. UConn sources told the Hartford Courant that the university doesn't consider this the right fit at this time. So there was a lot of chatter going on. Brett Yormark's two golden gooses, if you will, Gonzaga and UConn were mentioned in discussions with the Pac-12. Only Gonzaga is going to actually go. But I think Wilner's right about all that. It's totally fair, worth it for the position that they're in right now for them to go bring Gonzaga on board. I would say that if they're willing to go, which again, it almost surprises me a bit, maybe a tiny bit that they are, but they must be pretty sure in the finances of all of this. And if so, good for them, I suppose, to go do it. Now, Wilner then tweeted after all of this, Gonzaga changed the chessboard, opened up some opportunities. Some of the schools previously linked to the conference are not fully off the table. So, okay, does that mean that a UNLV is coming back to the table? Does that mean that a Memphis is coming back to the table? I'd be really interested to know who specifically that is, but it basically seems to be Wilner was a pretty informed dude, which he tends to be in Pac-12 country, and he was able to see that coming. If Gonzaga joins, it may reopen some doors that were perhaps closed or at least close to closed before that. So this is a win. This is a win for the Pac-12. It's a win for Wazoo and Oregon State. I applaud them for that. It was very much needed, very much necessary after things I don't think went the way a lot of Pac-12 fans, or most of us for that matter, figured that they would in this latest round of realignment. UConn's not going. And finally, one last thing I'll throw in here. All right, guys, UTEP to the Mountain West. UTEP to the Mountain West. Big bombshell. Utah is joining the Mountain West in 2026. The addition of UTEP comes 3 weeks after the Mountain West lost several schools and its future was in limbo. UTEP will join the Mountain West in 2026 as a full-time member in all sports. So the Mountain West now has 7 full members, also one short to be an FBS conference. So the race is on for both the Pac-12 and the Mountain West to add one more. Anyway, there's your realignment update. That's what we got. I see Wyoming Ute chiming in here. Thank you, my friend, for the support of the channel. I'm trying to see, Wyoming Ute, if you had anything else. Wyoming Ute, Big 12 AC. Here we go. Big 12 ACC group of 5 should file an antitrust suit. I know that's been talked about some. This is where it's just way over my head as far as, do I actually believe or know that would be in any way successful. How long would it take to play out? What would the ramifications be in the short term about all that? I am not intelligent enough to know the answers to those questions. So maybe they should, but I don't know. I have no idea. I would need some like legal expertise on that as to like how much of a case you would actually have and whether or not it would actually be worth it. Anyway, let's oh boy, my computer is about to die here, folks. I may have to run and grab my charger in just a moment. But I did want to run you through the Big 12 games that are coming up this week as we look ahead to Week 6. It is Week 6 in the Big 12 and across college football, and we get a Friday night game in the Big 12. We continue to get, Big 12 after dark games. Now Friday night, starting to get a little bit more used to some of the times that are outside of your particular windows that you're used to in college football. We've got Houston at TCU. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And I know I've got plenty of Houston fan viewership. I appreciate all of you guys. I say this with all sincerity. I hope that Houston scores a point in Big 12 play this week because it's been a rough go of it so far with back-to-back shutouts to Iowa State and Cincinnati. On the road at TCU, I got to tell you, I think they'll be able to score at least a point against the TCU defense. I would imagine that is going to happen. And 1 second, I am going to have to plug in my laptop. I apologize. All right, that should have been quick, but it was wrapped around my tripod. So thank you. Thank you for your patience, everybody. TCU got back on track last week. I still don't know that I really believe in them being much more than maybe a 6 or a 7 win team this year. And I still just have long-term concerns about like Sonny Dykes, man. Like what is Sonny Dykes? 2022 was great, but it feels now like this fluky miracle season. They were a mess against SMU. They coughed up a lead to UCF, which is not aging very well based on what we saw Saturday from the Knights. I don't know. I mean, TCU should be fine here, and Josh Hoover is great. I mean, I will say that if you want an underrated, really fun quarterback to watch in the conference, Josh Hoover's got almost 1,800 yards passing through 5 games, which is pretty ridiculous. 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. Like he's a very fun quarterback to watch, but TCU just, they are so much more style than substance. That's really what's been missing since the dream Max Duggan season. We just have not seen enough actual substance out of TCU. And I'm not sure that I'm expecting that to change dramatically anytime soon. Saturday, boy, and it is all late. You got no Big 12 games in the early window. You've got a 3:00 game, West Virginia at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, a 3-point favorite at home. What a year for both of these teams. I think a lot of people felt like this game could be much, much bigger in terms of the Big 12 race. Doesn't feel as big. Now, West Virginia's only played 1 conference game. They did win it, but had to come from behind to beat Kansas at the very end of the game. It feels like if West Virginia wins this feels like a game that like legitimately stamps them back into the like, all right, do we need to consider them in the Big 12 contender category? Maybe that's a bit unfair because it's on the road, but like, what more could you ask for? Oklahoma State is kind of in disarray right now after back-to-back weeks where they got thumped pretty good. And their offense is really struggling. They, if you take out garbage time scores, then they had 3 and 13 each of the last 2 weeks against Utah and K-State. Just scrambling at the end of the game. They built up some points there, and they can move the ball, but finishing, it's not working. Alan Bowman, Doesn't seem to work. Oklahoma State fans want Bowman benched. They want Casey Dunn, the offensive coordinator, fired. There's a lot of turmoil there, and you know what that means. And honestly, like, this is kind of my read on the game. You know what it means when there is turnover everywhere and people saying it's over for this team. Mike Gundy doesn't have it. You know what happens. What happens when all the doubters come out on Mike Gundy? He circles the wagons, he finds a way, and he pulls something out. It feels kind of like the post-South Alabama sort of moment to me for them. So I would imagine Oklahoma State is going to win, but I think that game could have a really big effect one way or the other on the season of who wins and who loses. Baylor's going to Iowa State. This continues Iowa State's very manageable stretch here. They've got a really manageable stretch of the schedule going on right now. I think they're going to be fine, even though the offense did not come alive until very, very late against Houston. The defense is just good enough to carry them, even if the offense is going to be a little slow to come around. But we'll see how much Baylor fights. It's getting rough. I saw Dave Aranda was asked this week what changes he would make, and he said, I think the change would be playing 4 full quarters of football. I mean, that would be a nice change. It felt like Baylor played like 3 quarters and almost a fourth minus 2 plays against Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and that obviously wound up costing them the game. Winning on the road at night at Jack Trice does not feel like where Dave Aranda is going to start making the big stand to turn this around and save his job. UCF and Florida, what a shame. What a shame the way that both teams are entering this game. That's my only thought about UCF and Florida. Like, it'll still be fun. It'll still be fun, and I would imagine that UCF is going to win this game. UCF is a 2.5-point road favorite in the Swamp, which is crazy and a sign of the times. Florida obviously has been generally a disaster this year. It's not looking great for Billy Napier. He's kind of a dead man walking situation. I'm sure it would be tough for Florida to be all that motivated by this, especially when, they've got murderer's row of everybody in the SEC coming up. And here comes little old UCF marching in there. But the problem there is, like, if it was UCF off of record big noon kickoff crowd, which they did have last week, then win over Colorado 4-0, unbeaten, number beside their name being ranked, it would feel like it could just be like a party through the Swamp and Ben Hill Griffin Stadium for UCF. That's been subdued. That's been blunted a bit by not just a loss, but taking it on the chin, man. A 4-score loss last week to Colorado. So there's still a lot to be gained in terms of bragging rights here for UCF. It definitely won't hurt the Big 12 if they can stack an SEC road win on the resume, but no one in the SEC is going to take that one seriously because of where Florida is at right now. So I wish that maybe Florida had at least, not totally spit the bit already. They could have just been okay. Maybe not get completely blasted by Miami, something. And then UCF going in unbeaten, it would be a little bit more fun. Last 2 games, pretty interesting. Kansas at Arizona State, ESPN2 at 7. Arizona State slight favorite. This is probably the point where I finally depart on, I'd been writing hey, Kansas is pretty talented. I feel like this is the week they're going to be able to get it turned around. I've been riding that train for the last 3 weeks. I think I'm finally going to have to be out on that and say, man, making a road trip to play an Arizona State team that has at least been solid, at least been pretty solid this year at 3-1. They definitely competed at Tech in that one loss. Kansas is just off. Something's off. Lance Leipold is like blaming officials. Now, I know he also stood up there and took responsibility at the podium too, Kansas fans. I get it. But when you're at the point where you've lost it enough to like go off on the officials and be in some ways kind of blaming them for your problems, you need to just look in the mirror. Like, it feels like there's been a lot of scapegoats, whether it's Jalen Daniels, whether it's Jeff Grimes, whether it's the officiating. Kansas just isn't a very good team right now. They can't finish. And at a certain point, you're just not great, and there's not one total cause of it. It's a little bit of everything. Yeah, maybe there has been a little bit of luck coming back down on Kansas this year, combined with having to replace an elite offensive coordinator, which has also brought down your quarterback, who tends to turn the ball over a lot. I think it could be all of those things. And, your defense still may not be quite at the level that you need it to be, particularly if you're not going to have the uber elite offense. I think all of those things could be coalescing right now to showcase all the problems that Kansas has. Arizona State, hey, keep marching toward bowl eligibility. That's really the thing with this game. If you look at Arizona State's schedule, it's not easy. They've got Utah at Cincinnati, at Oklahoma State, UCF, at K-State, BYU, at Arizona after this. Can you find me one of those games that you would say, yeah, Arizona State's going to win that for sure? Because I don't see it. So battle for bowl eligibility here in year 2 for Kenny Dillingham. This is a pretty important one for them to get at home against a 1-4 team in the conference. And Arizona is a 6-point home favorite against Texas Tech. Was that an aberration last week? Is Arizona always going to be that physical? Will they always be able to beat up on teams like they did to Utah in the trenches? Completely outrushing them, averaging almost twice as many yards per carry in the game. Like, getting after the quarterback, Arizona looked damn good. I mentioned this earlier, but they took Dino Babers off of play calling duties, which is very interesting. But Brent Brennan apparently was not afraid to make a change during the bye week, which I respect. The early returns on that were very good. So Arizona at home, I'd imagine, is going to be a pretty tough out there for Texas Tech, especially if that was kind of a turn the tide on the season sort of a moment for Arizona early here. They needed that in the worst way at Utah, and they really took it to the Utes. That has to be a massive, massive confidence boost. Look, Tech hasn't lost when Taj Brooks has played. They lost their one game, kind of a blowout. They hit up pretty good. They lost their one game at Washington State without him. So I can understand that case that Tech fans would be making. I would also push back and say, all right, let's see it in a spot like this, because the 2 wins were home games against Cincinnati and Arizona State, who appear to be better than we thought, but still 2 teams that were picked near the bottom of the league. Let's see what happens when you take this show on the road against guys like Tetero and McMillan. The problem for Tech right now is the defense. So how are you going to handle that Arizona offense? If, and emphasis on the if here, I would not say that I know this for sure, but if Arizona really has found more on offense than just Tetero and McMillan, because they did last week, it was not relying completely on him like they had for much of the year. If they have found some other faces that are really going to fill in there, that's going to make them much more dangerous, and they should be able to score a ton of points. What's the over-under here? Yeah, 64.5. We've got an over-under of 64.5 for that game. Contrast that with what's going on in Ames with Baylor and Iowa State, where it's 44.5. So we're expecting 20 more points for Big 12 After Dark, kicking at 9 o'clock Central on Fox. Or rather, wait, is that 10 o'clock Central? Is that kicking at 10 o'clock Central? My time zones here, ESPN. That is a crazy late game. That is a crazy late game between Texas Tech and Arizona. Probably going to be another one that your boy here will have to watch the next day, like I did Arizona and Utah. I was trying to stay up and watch all that game, but I couldn't last Saturday. I had to wake up Sunday morning and get after it. Okay, couple more reminders here real quick. I have 2 very quick points to make for you, but in between then, it is buzzer beater time. If you want to get something off on the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box. It will make sure that your question or comment makes it into the chat. If you are in the Twitter audience, I appreciate you. Welcome. You can submit questions like that. Put a super chat in if you are joined in on YouTube. Also would love it if you subscribe to the channel, if you migrate over there, if you're enjoying this. I see we've got 1,200 plus from Twitter right now watching. So it would be awesome if you guys could do that. But the other thing you can do, if you want Big 12 news straight to your inbox, 2 to 3 times per week, totally free. No Big Ten or SEC bias. You're not going to have to read Craig Sankey quotes that are just thrown into stories and only worried about how it affects the Big Ten or the SEC. I'm giving it to you how it affects the Big 12. You can sign up for my Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com to subscribe to the Open for Business newsletter. You can also just click the link in the description of the video on YouTube. But again, I know for those of you on Twitter, might be easier to just pop in ofbnews.com. Thank you so much to everybody who has done that. We've got almost 2,500 subscribers to it. Okay. A couple of things that look nice for the league. We'll start with this one. These both come courtesy of Jeff Fuller, who is great. I would highly recommend following him on Twitter. He's a very good follow and tweets a lot of good information out like this. So he tweeted the numbers from the Massey Composite, which is the average of dozens of different computer ranking systems. And it won't surprise you. The SEC is number 1, their average team rank 33rd. The Big Ten is number 2 at 40, and the Big 12 only 4 behind at 44. You'll see that the gap between the Big 12 and the ACC, which is down at 49, is higher than the Big 12 and the Big 10. Also, the Big 10, 7 behind the SEC, only 4 ahead of the Big 12. So as Jeff points out, hey, the Big 10 is actually closer to the Big 12 than it is the SEC, which has to be a tough blow to the Big Ten ego there. Tough blow. So sorry about that. Here's where your Big 12 schools are. Iowa State, look at the clones, all the way up at 10. UCF, who was kind of a computer darling before last week, not looking so hot after that loss to Colorado. But boy, this looks very similar to how I laid out my power rankings. ofbnews.com if you want access to those. But Iowa State, BYU, K-State, Utah being the top 4 there. The other thing from Jeff was about TV ratings, which there was like good and then sobering news, I would say, on the TV ratings front. I'm going to need to bring up Stuart Mandel's Twitter to get to the other tweet that is a little bit more sobering there. Let's see here. All right. So the good news we'll start with is from Jeff. Share the screen. Jeff. Okay, Jeff has the TV ratings here, and he says BYU Baylor drew 428K viewers on FS1 noon window. So Jeff is a BYU fan. He points out that BYU Baylor like crushed it in the FS1 noon window, which FS1, you're always going to be getting really poor rate. Like that's a tough spot to draw much of anything. But you look at some of the others, 138K, 195K, even like UConn, Maryland, 133K. It's not a great spot to be placed. And BYU Baylor was pulling over double any of those, easily over double any of those. Another great number was K-State and BYU in the 10 p.m. slot earlier this year, which drew 1.5 million compared to nobody else has been able to eclipse the 1 million mark on that. But as far as last week goes, you've got, where's Colorado here? Colorado UCF, third highest watched game of last week. The third most watched game of last week. Behind Georgia, Alabama, which did an insane number of almost 12 million people. Oklahoma, Auburn, it is above Kentucky, Ole Miss, Minnesota, Michigan, a couple of the Big Ten brands there, Vatech, Miami, which was standalone on a Friday night. So pretty good showing there. And K-State, Oklahoma State gets almost 2 million on ESPN in that time slot at 11 a.m. So you've got some Big 12 appearances here. You know, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Houston. Again, FS1 game. It's going to be tough to do a whole lot there. But I think the Colorado people watch Colorado, man. The Colorado numbers continue to be impressive here. Consistently over 3 or 4 million people really want to tune in to watch them. I will be very curious to see what that winds up being next week, because K-State Colorado will be a very big game, but it is Big 12 after dark slot. So how much is that going to hurt them? But always some good context from Jeff when it comes to Big 12 TV ratings there, and then also what was happening with the Massey ratings. So appreciate that from Jeff. Very, very much so. Would encourage you to go follow him on Twitter. And we will finish things off with Cat Fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. Appreciate you, my man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support of the channel. Hope you and your family are doing great, my friend. And, hey, I know Daniel is a Royals fan. How about the Royals, man? They get it done. 2-1 today. Beat the Orioles on to play the Yankees in the divisional series. I'm really looking forward to that, man. Oh, I see Daniel said. Go Royals. There we go. Yes, I was watching that while attending a virtual board meeting earlier today. So that was fun. That was exciting. It's bringing back all the 2014, 2015 vibes for your boy here, which those were great, great times. Great times watching those Royals teams make back-to-back World Series. Anyway, you guys aren't here for baseball. I appreciate you for being here for the college football. Would really appreciate it if you go signed up for my Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. Cutting through the Big 10 and the SEC crap for you, getting you the Big 10 or the Big 12 rather news that you need to know 2 to 3 times per week straight to your inbox, totally free. ofbnews.com, or click the link in the description of the video to sign up for the Open for Business newsletter. Tell your friends, like the video. Subscribe if you are not subscribed. That would be great. If you're a part of the massive Twitter audience that's here, would love it if you came and subscribed to the channel. Just John Kurtz on YouTube. Very easy to find there. But thank you for all the support from everybody as always. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to support the channel there as well. And I will kick off the next show with your question or comment. All right. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the college football weekend. I will be talking to you all very soon. Take care.